Okay, participants online, can you hear us? If you can just put in the chat and confirm that you can hear and see. Great, we are good to go then. I'll kick us off.
Good. Welcome everybody for joining us both in person and online. I'm Paul Wessel with the Clean Transportation Communities of Southern Connecticut. We're here at Croon Hall, the home of the Yale School of the Environment, to talk with two of the on-the-ground leaders of Yale's efforts to be a zero carbon institution. I'll make some brief opening remarks and then turn it over to our stars, Bill Carone. Is it Carone?
Corona, yeah.
Bill Carone and Ron Gittleman. We'll open up for discussion at the end. Zoomers, feel free to comment or question in the chat at any point. We'll be recording and posting online. And special thanks to Yale School Forestry student Alyssa Huntington for pulling all this together. It's something we've been working on for a while. I wanted to start out by talking to Yale's significance to the transition to reducing emissions and fighting climate change. Yale was one of the first universities to commit to reducing its emissions all the way back in 2005. At that point, it established the Yale Sustainability Office. As a university and a well-endowed one, has the opportunity to make significant long-term change. Yale Corporation isn't bound to 2 or 4 year election cycles or quarterly stockholder reports. So it has the ability to think far out on the horizon. It also has a responsibility to the New Haven community. I discovered this in preparing for this. Yale hosts 2 of the 3 largest emitting sites in the city. It's Sterling and Central Power Plants, which are responsible for over 13% of New Haven's total emissions, according, that is, to the pre-2025 EPA. Numbers may change in the future, we'll see. And Yale employs some of the preeminent climate thinkers dedicated to tackling these issues, most notably William Nordhaus at the School of Economics, and has adopted and practiced the most important economic approach to tackling climate change. And this is an approach, social cost of carbon computation, that's under attack right now at the federal level. Yale's embracing of the social cost of carbon goes back to a summit in 2014, where William Nordhaus and Dan Esty were at a summit, discussed the possibility. Students then organized around it. Then President Salovey formed the task force, met with students, faculty, and staff, consulted with experts, and started a pilot of the internal carbon costing, basically. In 2015, the programs continued to evolve, I think as many people know, has a focus on buildings and is the foundation for much of Yale's sustainability work. So fast forwarding to today, here's a statement from Yale that's significant to the work that we do as the Clean Transportation Community of Southern Connecticut. That is, Yale is committed to achieving zero actual carbon emissions by 2050, with an interim goal to reach net zero emissions by 2035. This goal extends across Scope 1 emissions, direct emissions from sources owned or controlled by Yale, including emissions from our fleet of vehicles, Ron's wheelhouse, and our power plants. So I want to wrap up this introduction with a couple paragraphs from Yale's climate action strategy, because I think they sort of position us well. The climate action strategy begins: climate change is the most important, the most pressing issue facing humanity in the 21st century. And to address it requires urgent action. Yale is committed to meeting this challenge across every part of the university, through research and teaching, through the management of the university's assets, and through reducing campus carbon emissions. On campus, Yale aims to reduce actual carbon emissions to zero as soon as possible and no later than 2050. This ambition represents a dramatic new commitment that over 29 years will reshape the university's approach to the consumption of energy. It also represents an ongoing set of experiments. We have two of the experimenters right here. As a research university, we are especially well positioned to try new approaches to carbon mitigation in service of the global energy transition. Where we are successful and where our success is emulated, Yale will play a vital part in the global effort to dramatically reduce the use of fossil fuel over the next 3 days. It's lofty stuff, and I think it's happening. And that brings us to Croon Hall here today. We're going to learn about some of the lessons we've learned from this work to date. We know that intentional change is hard. I'm here as the director of one of 80 Clean Cities coalitions across the country. Our goal as the boots on the ground for the US Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office is to foster the adoption of cleaner fuel transportation, to celebrate the technology innovators and early adopters moving us forward. Today, we want to celebrate and learn from two people who are essential to leading the way to reducing emissions at Yale. Ron Gittleman, Senior Fleet Administrator and Supervisor of Landscaping and Maintenance Services, Bill Caron. They are two people who experiment, fail, sometimes repeatedly, and ultimately succeed in figuring out how to make this all real on the ground. I want to start with Ron, who's been working with this on Yale's vehicles for almost 14 years, if I have this correct. And if I'm not mistaken, he's worked with natural gas, propane, diesel, biodiesel, hybrids, and more. And he's learned a lot of lessons about EV charging equipment and how to make sure your equipment is reliable and provides good data. So Ron, you want to take it from here?
So I'm Ron Gittleman. I'm the Senior Fleet Administrator for Yale University. I worked under our Assistant Director of Transportation, Joe Carlino, who also handles the transit fleet. He's our transit liaison. And George Longier Jr., who's the Director of Transportation for Yale. I've been at Yale the 23 years next week, and I've been doing this officially fully fleet since April 1st of 2011. Over that time, I've worked with Clean Cities in New Haven, Paul and his predecessor, Lee Granis. I've also worked with Empire Clean Cities in New York at times. And over time, I've become pretty much an expert in fleet and in sustainability. We have about 580 vehicles, including buses, public safety, athletics. Facilities is our largest. They have somewhere around 220 vehicles. Dining services, just all over. We have vehicles that stay local, that will not leave the New Haven area. We have vehicles that go all over the country. So it's quite an operation. I have two young ladies who help me with the fleet management, with things, with my workload, Leanne Cretella and Catherine Bernard. So we have quite a robust operation. We operate out of 2 Whitney Avenue. So to describe, first of all, we were one of the early adopters of electric vehicles. Our first one was in 2012 when we bought a Ford Transit Connect electric upfit by Azure Dynamics. Great vehicle. Problem is the upfitter Azure Dynamics went bankrupt a few months later. And then when the vehicle broke down, it was hard to get parts and someone to repair it. Luckily, for a while, we had someone who was part of the Yale, who was getting his MBA here, who actually worked on them and helped us keep it going as long as possible.
Can you explain what upfitting is?
So what they did is we'd get the Ford Transit Connect. And instead of the electric drivetrain being manufactured by Ford, it was manufactured by Azure Dynamics, who would then take that and put in their battery packs. They would basically tear up a lot of the operating part of the vehicle. We really liked it. The people who drove it liked it. But again, unfortunately, it was a new company and they couldn't get enough and they ended up going bankrupt. And eventually you couldn't get parts. We've delved in all kinds of alternative fuels. We did natural gas for a while. Problem with natural gas is we couldn't get anything at the side of our buses, at the side of our vehicles. So the only places they could fuel was Metro Taxi in West Haven and at American Waste at the port. And when you're located in Hamden, driving all the way down there became burdensome. We've also done propane. We still have a number of propane, bi-fuel propane and dedicated propane vehicles, which are meant to be a bridge to whatever technology was coming next. We have, I believe, 13 electric vehicles spread out. This is one of them we bought. We actually have 2 of those. This is a Ford Transit 350 EV. Difference between this and our first one, this is manufactured by Ford, will be serviced by Ford, and is warranted by Ford. If we need service, we can take it right down to Bob Thomas. They can handle it, or to any Ford dealer. We also have in our fleet Chevrolet Bolts. Those were our next EVs. You may see them driving around periodically. I have one I use for work. Our transit doesn't have. Our TRS has some, security has some. We also have Toyota BZ4X, kind of a weird name, but it really means beyond zero for the future, I believe. We have several of those. They're doing quite well. Whitehall, which is a student organization that does outreach throughout the state, has a couple of them. They love them. Purely electric, 200-mile, 250-mile range. We have, we just recently brought in renewable diesel. I don't know if you're familiar with renewable diesel. It's 99% renewable, 1% diesel, and is considered by many to be almost as clean at the tailpipe as electric. Right now, we don't have the ability to bring in electric buses. So this is serving as a bridge for our larger vehicles. We were running them on B5 to B20, B20 in warmer months, B5 in the winter because it clogs. But now those buses have switched over to primarily renewable diesel. But when it gets really cold, we actually have to put in regular diesel because one of the weaknesses of renewable diesel is handling bitterly cold weather. So when it got down to 5 degrees, 10 degrees, if you remember that, we actually had to use regular diesel, but that's rare. We have EV infrastructure building up across campus. My boss, George E. Longyear, the parking department, Joseph Carlino and I have worked on that. We leased the charge point chargers for a while because technology is changing. Maybe there'd be a better technology. Recently, we purchased them, so they're all owned. They are open to the public in the public areas. But mostly they're used for Yale vehicles and vehicles for Yale people. There were a couple in Pearson Sage Garage. I believe that's inaccessible right now. So we have a charger over at 344 Winchester where this one charges. We have chargers in garages. We'd like to put more out at 344 Winchester, but that's a brownfield location, so you can't dig down to run the electric lines. We may be looking at other options.
Are those all level 2?
All level 2. We don't have level 3, but the good news is there's level 3 in a lot of different places you go. If you have an electric vehicle, usually you can look it up. You need to make sure it's working. Don't count on just one. Yale's chargers, they do go down. Yale's parking department, once they're notified, they're good at getting someone to service them. If a vehicle is traveling, we can put them on a level 3. There is hope to put in more. We are putting in an electric charger. I think they're putting one in over at the YPD as they're getting ready to get their first electric vehicle. Chevy Blazer, police pursuit vehicle or special service vehicle should be in the next month, and then it has to be upfit with lights and stuff. We're working on that with them to try to get a charger that can be dedicated for their use. We have a lot of hybrids. We have about 80 to 90 hybrids in the fleet. And we keep adding hybrids where we can. So the YPD, a lot of their patrol vehicles are now Ford Explorer hybrids. We've worked with them. We got them to start buying them. They love them. So they still have some older vehicles that they haven't put in hybrid yet, but every time they order, they do hybrid. Also, one of our policies, anyone getting a passenger vehicle or an SUV, unless it's a special circumstance, has to get an electric or hybrid. We have a few exceptions out there. It's like for the sailing team, because they'll travel 300-400 miles. They may go down to Virginia or Florida. We can't just put them in an EV at that point. But very few passenger vehicles that are purchased now will be anything other than hybrid or electric. And that's a requirement that that George Longyear Jr. and I put into place. Also required, if an EV is an option, they have to consider it. And they have to tell me why they can't do an EV. I don't put up with, well, range, we don't have enough range. You're driving 20 miles a day, you have enough range. Oh, they don't drive well. We've been experimenting with this for 8 years plus. They drive fine. They don't have enough speed. What about snow? That was a big one with the Chevy Bolts, the snow. Well, New York City, I've followed New York City for many years, been involved down there. They use the Bolts. They don't have problem with snow. Their hills aren't as big as ours maybe, but they're able to do it. So what security does is they put snow tires on during the winter. Whatever they want to do, but saying that, oh, the snow won't work is not an excuse for us. Again, we have about 13 electric vehicles, 14 with the one coming in. I'm hoping we can expect more. I was asked, what's the timeline for conversion? There is no timeline. Not all our vehicles can be converted to EV, which is kind of sad. Our buses are, you see the smaller buses that drive around? We can't convert those. Can't get them in EV. The company, Lightning Motors was a big company for them, and they went bankrupt. And so there's really nothing in that model right now that can meet our needs and our requirements.
You're talking about the Yale shuttle, right?
The Yale shuttle. Also, there are weight requirements. So because of the weight, and the weight requirements putting on the battery pack just makes it too heavy. So for those, we run propane right now on some of them. And we run unleaded gas, and most of the propane is bi-fuel. On our larger buses, new full-size transit electric will run you somewhere around $800,000 to $1 million. And that's not money that has been allocated for that. So in light of that, we did switch them over beginning in January to renewable diesel, which wasn't available in Connecticut on a wide scale until recently. I had been following a friend of mine out in Oregon who's using it, and people in California. And so before we switched over, I talked to them, talked to people in New York City is moving to renewable diesel for all their diesel vehicles. It's a great bridge, and it will hold us. There isn't part of the reason we can't give a timeline is because the funding for vehicles lies with the department. It's in their budget. Fleet and administrative services, we don't have the budget authority to go out and buy vehicles. We don't have the authority for me to go to Bill and say, Bill, you have to replace this vehicle. I have to go to his finance office. They have to tell me what they're needing. And that's just the way Yale operates and has operated. I think we'll get there.
How were you able to get control over departments having to come to you when they wanted to purchase a vehicle?
So years ago, before we started Fleet, and that Fleet came about as a result of the 2008 financial crisis. Shauna King, who was the VP of Finance, and really good one, thought we didn't need vehicles, and she learned that we did, so my boss, George Longear, was tasked with finding out how many vehicles Yale owned. They didn't know where the vehicles were, nobody knew. And he did a great job with that and pulled them together, and we started with an access database. In 2010, I started doing some fleet responsibility, and I was hired by George Longear in 2011 to be the fleet coordinator and now fleet administrator. We have centralized the fleet. Nobody buys a vehicle except through fleet.
Was that difficult to get that power?
It was, but George's boss, Janet Lindner, had the ability to go and do that. It was hard. People didn't trust me. They would come to me and say, well, I'm a better car person. I know cars. And so eventually, as I learned and got my confidence and everything, I said to them, you may be a car person, I'm a fleet person, two separate things. Years ago, and you may still see some of this, our vehicles were many different makes, many different models, many different colors, many different brandings. And we have centralized all that. We're also able to track utilization. We have telematics devices on almost all our vehicles. Contrary to what people think, I don't sit there and watch what they're doing with the vehicle, but I can get reports, and now we're in the middle of an upgrade, and soon we'll be able to get really solid reports on utilization, how far they're driving, and start looking at right sizing the fleet. We also worked with Megan Dahlmeyer over at West Campus, and they actually, for their people there, have a car sharing system. So if people need to go to a conference or need to go from West to Central Campus, they can check out a vehicle, bring it back. Right now they have one hybrid and 3 other cars. It gets good use, and that way that people don't have to use their own cars. Fleets that were the early adopters. So I was following and working closely with New York City. Keith Kernan, DCAS, Jonathan Ells, who was a Yale graduate, who worked with Keith Kernan for many years but has moved on. I've worked with the Port Authority. I'm Jim Reinish, who left, and now I've also worked in the past with Jim Heineson, who's a great guy out there. I followed Empire Clean Cities. I've actually spoken at their stakeholder meeting and attended a few times. And we have worked well with them. And so I've really followed New York. New York is my pattern. So if something fails in New York, I'm not bringing it here. I also worked with NYPD, former Deputy Commissioner Robert Martinez, who became a really good friend of mine. And he's been, they were piloting Teslas and Mach-E's for their police fleet. I don't know exactly, because he left, he retired. I don't know exactly what they're doing there now, but you know, the Mach-E, the electric vehicle, it works for police operations for them. It's going to work for us. They have a much bigger area to cover. I've also followed others out in Oregon, California, Iowa places. I have some good fleet friends there. New Jersey, I keep on top of what's going on in the fleet sector so that we can pattern after them. If someone tells me, wow, these cars are just not working and they have a similar operation, I can bring it into Yale. Worst thing you can do is give someone an electric vehicle and it fails. You'll never get them to buy one again. You don't really have to train to drive an electric vehicle. You don't have to do any special upfitting. You don't take a regular internal combustion engine, upfit it to electric. You just buy all electric. Whereas 12, 13 years ago, manufacturers weren't making these vehicles. They are now. Chevy has some coming out. Ford has several. Toyota's really going. Honda just introduced the Prologue. Looks like a great vehicle. So we're starting to see the manufacturers do more with electric. These vans have done really, really well for us. People like them. That might be the future of our carbon vans. They're not all that high, some are lower route. And well, we have to go where the manufacturers go. I don't know how the new tariffs will affect the electric vehicle market, we'll see. But that's where we are with fleet. It's been a great operation. We are committed 100% to the Yale sustainability plan, and I do work with Amber Gerard over there too at times. So we do not work in opposition to them, we work with them. 2050, I won't be here, but hopefully my successor will be able to continue it on.
What sort of reporting do you do?
What
sort of emissions reporting do you do?
I actually use the Athla Fleet, A Fleet tool, the A Fleet tool from
Argonne National Lab.
Argonne National Labs, so I'm actually monitoring it that way. And I'm starting to monitor it monthly, so you've got the vehicle, type of vehicle. You put in the fuel usage in miles based on what type of fuel, it will calculate your emissions per short ton. So that's what I'm using, I think we're getting sustainability time.
You report up the chain here on your emissions?
I report to my bosses, who report to the AVP of admin services, who then goes up and reports to other officials. We've really increased a lot over the years.
All right, why don't we turn it over to Bill Carone now, talking about his department, landscaping and maintenance, and then we'll open up for some questions and discussion.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Alyssa, for inviting me, and thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Excuse me. All right, hello, my name is Bill Carone, and I've been with the Yale University Landscape and Grounds Department for 3 years now. I came before I was employed at the City of New Haven, the Public Works and Parks Department. Yale Grounds and Landscape is a department with 55 plus or minus full-time staff, over 5 campuses of Yale. So the West Campus, the medical campus, athletics, central, and science here. Each staff, if you think about it, probably is assigned about 5 pieces of landscape equipment to them, and that's, so you're looking at, 50 landscapers, times 5. So we have a pretty good inventory of landscape equipment. We probably have over 25 vehicles as well to help us transport tools and goods to job sites, and the vehicles do help us with snow plowing as well. The Landscape and Grounds Department, we want to support Yale's commitment, to sustainability and to the environmental responsibility. Back in 2015, we started transferring gas-powered landscape equipment into electric equipment. And currently, the central campus is about 95% converted to all electric landscape equipment. The science campus, we are about 60% there to convert to electric equipment. The West Campus is starting, same with athletics and the med school. And what I mean by landscape equipment, it's kind of like your small, landscape equipment, like weed whackers, leaf blowers, lawn mowers, chainsaws, hedge trimmers.
And are you rolling this out over time in the departments?
Yes, yep, over time. And it's going really well. We're getting really great feedback from staff and from the Yale community as well. So, and that, really supports, the Yale's goal that you mentioned, by 2050, being the carbon neutral. So yeah, environmental impact is a positive, health and safety is a big one. Why we really support electric equipment, especially the fumes and also the noise that staff has to be around, and even people around staff that are working could be impacted by the fumes or the noise. And while electric equipment is expensive upfront, if over time it is less expensive to maintain electric equipment than it is gas powered equipment. And you know, we're Yale, you know, we want to be the best, we want to lead in sustainability. And also, you know, Michael, the landscape department is to, you know, be a role model for other universities. So. Let's see here. Question here. So what is holding us? So, you know, for some campuses, you know, why are we at like 60% right now or 50%? And the three most major impacts for us is one, the upfront cost. You know, electric equipment requires, you know, a higher budget request every fiscal year for our department compared to gas powered equipment. Now, even though like the long-term maintenance, you know, outweighs that, just the upfront cost gets very pricey. For example, one 60-inch ride-on mower that's electric goes for $50,000, and a 60-inch gas-powered lawnmower goes for $12,000. So currently, you know, that, you know, we just can't convert all of our, you know, ride-on mowers at once, so we slowly have to incorporate that into our budget. One other impact on electric equipment for us is the battery life and performance. The electric equipment worked really well for us in especially central campus, since the courtyards are small and we have smaller areas to maintain. But once you get up to, say, you know, upper science area or west campus, where you have larger areas to maintain, you know, the staff will have to charge the batteries, you know, halfway through their job. And that could cause some efficiency issues and not getting jobs done in time. And also,
Are they able to swap out batteries?
well, they can, but then the issue we come into is, you know, where do staff are, you know, where are they having these batteries?
yeah.
Or, you know, where are they being charged as well? And also, like, you know, the range, you know, like I said before, we noticed that the batteries are not lasting that long. For a large area, electric lawnmower will last about 1 hour.
Mm.
You know, and then, but for central campus, 1 hour of mowing does about, you know, 4 or 5 colleges, because they're small courtyards. So that's why we're trying to even try to take away a lot of grass in our landscapes and convert to, you know, more sustainable options that have a lower, you know, input from equipment. So, you know, one interesting comment is trying to, you know, convince staff that, you know, that they need to be assigned to electric equipment. And I mentioned this before, is that staff, you know, are on board because, you know, of the noise, you know, it's very quiet, less emissions. Our mechanics like it in the long run, due to, you know, less maintenance issues or, you know, any preventive maintenance or changing oils or all that spark plugs. Some concern staff has is the performance, you know, especially in large landscape areas where halfway through the job, you know, the battery will die and they have to stop, switch a battery, or call someone to bring them a battery. And then also just trying to figure out, you know, where can we put in battery charging stations on campus that grounds could access, you know, that may be an academic building or somewhere, and then seeing if the building can handle the electric needs from charging all these batteries.
So how do you deal with that? Do you talk with facilities or?
Yeah, so we talk with facilities, we'll talk with, you know, the building operations manager and our electrical department. And they've been really supportive with us. We installed new charging stations right next to the Yale Human Resources Building on Whitney Avenue across from the Peabody. We have one going in currently right now in it's either Franklin or Murray College. And we have a bunch downtown, but they're only minor stations, you know, we could probably only charge 4 or 5 batteries there. But we would like to improve that, so.
We have a question from online also
Yeah.
asking, does your array of equipment include electric chore tools? Chore tools? And Peggy, you can unmute if you wanna elaborate on what chore tools are.
Hi there, I'm Peggy O'Neill Vivanco. I'm from the Vermont Clean Communities Coalition, and I worked a lot
Hi,
with the
Peggy.
university. Hi, Paul. I worked a lot with the University of Vermont on lawn care electrification. First with, we've got state and utility funds that were used, and so they first piloted the zero-turn electric mowers like I see here. And then they started getting into the electric chore tools, in part dealing also with the kind of the battery change out so that they could have a bank of batteries that then could be used for, you know, the hedge trimmers and the weed whackers and so forth. So didn't know if your kind of whole composite is looking at the ability to change out batteries. Also, if you're using those electric chore tools that you usually use like 4 of those kinds of batteries for one of the bigger zero turns. But anyway, just wondering.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And it's true, when we try to purchase our electric landscape equipment, we try to make sure that the equipment package that we get, it comes as a package, and you could use the same type of batteries for all the different equipment. You know, which all fit the different chargers that we have at our stations. The only oddball is just some of the ride-on mowers have their own unique lithium ion battery, rather than, you know, our small maintenance tools like the hedge trimmers or string trimmers and, you know, say battery powered augers. So, you know, we're always trying to think ahead of where we can keep battery banks that could support, you know, more campuses than trying to have maybe more spread around campus. But the batteries are interchangeable, which does make it easier for us, and they are available too.
So do you buy from a single manufacturer typically?
We like to use Still. Still has is really great with Yale. You know, they always come out and do demos for us, and their technology is improving every year. Toro is another company that is starting to get better with their ride-on mowers, which will help make the costs go down. And Mean Green is another company that is in this picture here. This is a Mean Green electric ride-on mower. And the company just got bought out by another company, so I'm not sure how the impact's gonna be, but the sales rep is gonna be coming down in April to show us some new equipment, so. And then another big question people have is, what about winter for electric equipment? And we've tried, we do have about 25 to 30 electric snow blowers. And they do pretty well with a light fluffy snow that is 3 inches or less. If we get, you know, if we get into the 4 or 5 inches of snow, or if the snow is kind of icy and slushy, the batteries probably last like 20 minutes compared to like a full like 2.5 hour charge. So hopefully the technology will improve for electric snow blowers, which is important because when we're doing snow removal around, you know, dorms at 2 o'clock in the morning, we really don't want to keep students awake. So we apologize if that happened this year, because we had many snowstorms this year. And we have not tested yet or seen any electric or hybrid trucks that can do snow removal for us. So maybe someday, you know, that would be an option.
There are trucks available, but they're big, and you may not be able to get them
The
Off
type
the road.
speakers, yeah,
Talking the F-150.
yeah, so. And also, if it's very cold weather, a lot of times the batteries don't perform well, or you know, they just won't
Yeah.
start, so that's always an issue too. But we are open to trying, you know, more snow equipment, you know, that's electric.
What size snowboard do you have?
They are this 22. Right now they make like a 21 or 22 inch snow blower, and they have an 18-inch too.
I didn't realize till I did some research for this, that the two-stroke engines are really very polluting. It's the mixture of the gasoline and
Yeah.
oil, I think, that spews
Yeah,
pretty noxious
very,
fumes.
yeah, very pollutions, yeah. It is, and it really bothers staff, so. Staff is very pleased that we're changing out all of our gas powered leaf blowers and string trimmers, so. We're almost, Science Hill will be 100% by this summer. And Central is already, med school will be, so our goal is to have all 5 campuses with the small equipment by the end of the summer, which is gonna be great, so. And we had support from, you know, Yale to give us the funding to do that. And we also could trade in our gas equipment to the dealerships, which we do get a credit for, so that helps a lot too. And last one, the next steps, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote notes this week, so.
Good notes.
So our next steps for the landscape and grounds equipment would be to, you know, continue to replace gas equipment. And also continue to keep, you know, doing demos, you know, and staying with the latest trends and attended, you know, conferences. And Ron and I will be going to a like a demo show in New York City in May to see, you know, even more new electric equipment there.
What's the show?
The New York City Recast Fleet Show.
Mhm.
So you have all kinds of equipment, vehicles, alternative fuel, electric. So I've gone several times, I haven't
Yeah.
gone for a bit, but now it's time to get back into it.
Now, it's a great resource to see what New York City is doing, as you
It's
mentioned.
open to the public if anyone
Yeah.
were interested. It's over in Flushing Park. You just walk in, there's no tickets. If you're hungry, a lot of the vendors have food.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one also kind of policy that I recommended for campus with which is currently happening, is anytime Yale, you know, builds a new building or does any
I heard
remodeling,
about
that they have, you know, that they need to include, you know, charging stations for landscape and grounds equipment. So all the future buildings actually will go up in Upper Science Hill. All the equipment up there will be electric, and we'll have the, you know, the facilities to support that, so that's very
Is the
exciting.
equipment stored around the campus or centrally?
We have equipment stored around the campus, yep.
And how big are the charging areas that you need?
Think of I'm trying to think. Like a locker, like,
Yep.
you know, like a high school locker or something, like 4 of those maybe. You know, with just different chargers in the locker and stuff, so. So it doesn't take up a lot of real estate, you know, you could design them pretty efficiently. There's also some experiment with maybe trying to put some charging stations in cars, in our trucks as well too. But I need to have a conversation with you about that, so. And the last thing is, you know, we just continue to collaborate with, you know, local and state, you know, government, if there's any grants out there, or, you know, with, you know, Alyssa, like with your help, I know you made some connections, you know, for me and stuff, so. You know, we really support electric equipment, and we're gonna continue to be fully electric soon, so.
Where do you learn the most from?
Pretty much from other people in the industry we do, so, which is really great, so, you know. We're at Yale, you know, our department is involved with a little group with other Ivy League schools like Cornell, and Harvard, and we're gonna be doing an expo with them in June to talk about electric equipment, so.
What's the group?
It's the Ivy, it's like called an Ivy League like grounds group, so.
Cool.
Yeah. It's small, but
Yeah.
it's fun.
Small but mighty.
Yeah,
Good.
I think that's all I got.
Questions or comments for anybody? Go ahead.
Thanks by the way for your time. It's very cool. I was curious, I had a couple different questions, but Ron, I was curious if you could talk a bit about how you plan for uncertainty. And like one of the things you mentioned, for example,
Sorry, what?
sorry, how do you plan for uncertainty? And like one of the things that you mentioned, for example, was like the tariffs and how that might have an impact, but not just politically, but also technologically. How you decide when to invest, because I assume a vehicle has a life of like a decade-ish. So then how do you decide if you should buy a vehicle now or wait for the technology to get better to be able to buy a vehicle then? Because in theory, there's a trade-off there.
The process of buying vehicles is the department has been the one that moves forward. Bill just proposed 5 vehicles. So when they need the vehicles, they go through their business office. And then we do that. If things can change where we take it over, I would look at age. Once the vehicle hits 5 years, 6 years, your maintenance costs will continue to increase. We've had vehicles that are 30 years old that just got rid of. People are like, well, it's cheaper to maintain than to keep, than to replace, and that's true. But you're gonna find other things just start going wrong one after another. There's a reason why they only give you 5-year warranty on the powertrain, because after 5 years, even if you don't drive much, the environment, the roads, the warm, cold weather, it wears on the vehicles. New Haven's climate can go from, I don't know, to type in out here, -10 degrees to as high as 105. And that will wear on the car. So my ideal is that our ideal is people replace them every 5 to 7 years. Actuality, that doesn't happen because it's based on what money they have available.
And other questions?
Two, but
Good.
Yeah, so this is mainly for Bill. You had mentioned at the end that some of your next steps are involving collaborating with local and state governments. I was curious about particularly how that works in the snow. So I feel like with landscaping, you kind of have defined boundaries as to what grasses you need to cut, what campuses you need to kind of deal with the snow, especially like Yale being so integrated with New Haven, like in terms of building out that fleet for roads and so like how are you working with the local government in New Haven to particularly deal with snow? And also I think the other thing that came to my mind was in terms of like salting roads. I think that was the one thing, because I know there's different trucks that also salt roads. So just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great question. And so currently we haven't touched on any conversations yet with the city or even like the state about winter equipment yet. And I think that is something that it needs to happen soon. That's really, that's a really good point. But our partnership with the city right now is that they're coming to us and asking for our feedback on, what works, what doesn't work. And actually, the neighborhood of like Worcester Square Park, neighborhood is very interested in electric equipment and trying to, have a policy made where, if they hire any contractors who do lawn maintenance in their area, that they need to use electric equipment and stuff. So I think we have to give a talk to them pretty soon, but for the winter equipment, yeah, I'm not sure how that, would look like yet, but that's a good question though. So I could, if I get your email address, I could make a couple of phone calls and I could let you know, actually, all right?
Great.
So maybe
I'll
Lisa,
connect
if
you
you
guys
wanna
later.
connect us, okay?
Awesome, thank you.
We have about 5 minutes before another class comes in, so I'm gonna read 2 from online and you guys can address it as you want. With respect to the comment about high upfront cost, even if the total cost of ownership is lower, has the university explored leasing or alternative financing arrangements? Or is there a requirement to purchase the vehicles? A second question for Ron, I imagine you're aware that Hotel Marcel converted a Dodge Ram ProMaster 2500 airport shuttle to an EV for guest usage. Could you elaborate more on why something like this wouldn't work with the Yale shuttle?
Okay, so we do lease vehicles. Some of our BZ4Xs are leased. That is an option. The lease costs right now are for a 3-year lease will run you $450 to $550. I have a hybrid at home I lease, it's, $500 plus. It's up to the department if they want to lease, it's an option presented. They can also do what's known as a capital lease, which is you pay monthly payment, and then at the end of 3 years or 5 years, you do a balloon payment. You have to pay it. Or you sell the vehicle and you have to give back any difference to the company. So we do offer leasing. Now, as far as Hotel Marcel, we're very aware of that. However, what Hotel Marcel does not equal what Yale does. So if you've been on our small shuttles, they're usually 20 plus 2, 22 plus 2 passengers on our smaller shuttles. There are also ADA requirements for wheelchair ramps. So what they did is really good and exciting. But a hotel shuttle versus our campus shuttle, 2 different things. I'm always keeping an eye out for what's out there. If something comes up and a new technology, a new vehicle, then of course EV will begin to be considered.
Have you looked at total cost of ownership and computed that out for departments? I saw something about the printing vehicle where in the first X number of miles that they ran, the fuel costs were significantly cheaper than the gasoline
So
costs would have
the
been.
EV cost is 30 cents per kilowatt hour. University charges. Departments pay it. We actually have with our universal fleet card, we have an electric option. So it all floats into our fleet system. I would love to get into doing a total cost of ownership. We've taken on so much and I'm trying to get, work reallocated, but that's something to do. Also, because I'm part of an organization called NASA, I have access to Vincentric, which can kind of give you an idea of, based on a vehicle, how much you can expect to spend. I'm eventually going to do reporting to see how Yale compares to this.
Oh,
And and for us, we're about 7 or 8 cents an hour to charge our batteries. And then lawnmowers will use, a gallon of gas every half hour. And gas per gallon now is over $3. So we're starting to look at those costs as well.
great.
So
Well, cool. This was really interesting and I'm glad we finally got it together. It's taken a while. And thank you all for joining us and we look forward to continuing the discussion.
Our emails, the fleet website.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all for joining.
Need some help in doing ownership stuff?
Retiring assistant to help with your financial side.
We've got some money and we could hire a grad student or something.
Yeah, no, I can do it. I just have to
Yeah.